This is Andrew with True Vine Entertainment, and today we're starting our brand new series on mastering, how to master for each different platform, and how to get really dynamic, cohesive masters that sound loud on every platform so you can compete with those professional mixes. I don't think there's a lot of people talking about this on YouTube, so this is some real sauce for you today. And so we're just going to get started here. So first things first is bringing the mix into the session. So you can actually do this on the master, like, you can have all your tracks out here. The same thing concept applies to any DAW, but we're working in Ableton today. So you can have all your tracks out here and then, master over here. But just to save CPU, since I have a lot of stuff running right now, I'm just going to master straight from an audio file. I don't really think any is necessarily better than the other. Like, there's advantages to both. If you master this way, it's better on your CPU, but if you master in the mix, and it's easier to go and fix something in the mix as opposed to the master. But since this is a mastering series, we're going to focus explicitly on mastering, so I think this is going to be how we record the majority of these. So first thing is first, I like to keep every version of the mix in here. Sometimes when I'm mastering this way, I kind of use this as a folder to store all the different mixes that I'll be mastering, so I can, go back and check different versions. But, I have this unmastered version of this beat Castlevania that I made a while ago, so I'm going to pull that into the arrangement here. And the first thing that I need to do is unwarp it. As you see, like, warping it just affects the whole thing. It'll try to slow it down, and there's all these different settings here that you would have to mess with, so it's just better not to warp it. You want to work with the original audio that you had intended to bring into the session. The next thing is to lower this down to 000. That makes sure that you have the exact right starting point. For some reason, Ableton will do that. That's just kind of an Ableton specific thing, so I mentioned it. The rest of this should be pretty much the same no matter what DAW you're using. So, we look in here, you can see it's a pretty dynamic mix. It's not my best work, but we have defined peaks and a defined bed for the audio, and we're going to talk about how to really measure this effectively. I'm going to play a couple snippets just here from the intro and in the middle of the beat so you can hear what we're working with. And in this episode, we're just covering the basic foundation of good mastering. Then we'll dive more into each platform, what each platform is looking for in the future episodes. So this is the intro.
Andrew, don't play.
I'm in low latency mode. Let me take that off. Oh, no, I'm not in low latency mode. So that's that. And then, so, pretty heavy trap metal beat. So, we want to master loud. And I chose this because I think you'll be able to better see some of the kind of counterintuitive things surrounding loudness working with a trap metal track like this, where the goal is really to make it very loud. So the first thing we really need to do is check out what we're working with. And I want to actually highlight an issue that you may find in the mixing side that's a lot harder to fix in mastering, and I think this track has the issue to a significant extent. But first, let's pull up Ulian Loudness Meter 2. This is a free plugin. I'll put the link in the description for this Ulian Loudness Meter. And this is a phenomenal plugin. So basically it's going to measure our LUFS, which stands for Loudness Units Full Scale, as well as a bunch of other really helpful different statistics here, or different meters. It's like multiple meters in one. It's measuring a lot of different aspects of the audio. So this integrated LUFS is going to be the most important for pretty much everything we discuss from this point forward. I also have noticed that true peak is quite important, and this is, you usually hear people talking about LUFS and true peak. I find that these actually tend to be very, very important, this dynamic range and average dynamics. So this is showing, what is the range between your lowest point and your highest point in the mix. So like, if you have 20 decibels of dynamic range, then you're seeing, like say from -36 is your lowest point in the mix, and then -16 is your highest point. So that would be, what the dynamic range measures. And then average dynamics, this is referring to, kind of an aggregate over time. So it measures, between your average kind of regular volume as well as your peaks, what is the range there. And so when you're mixing, this is really important. I try to aim for about 14 decibels of dynamic range. You can probably be safe with like 9 to 10, but the more dynamic range you have, the better. One thing you'll notice as we go through this series is that dynamic is the new loud. So let's listen to this. The really important setting to adjust here is this. So, this is probably about a 3-minute beat, maybe shorter, but it should be enough to measure it well. So we're just going to look at this, and we'll probably listen up to like about here at, so this is going to be a bit of listening here, but I want you to watch the meters, and I'll point out some things as it goes along. Right off the bat,
Andrew, don't play.
Start off really quiet. We're looking at -28 LUFS. This is the average volume. The true peak, it already got fairly high. We're already at -0 decibels. So that's actually quite a bit higher than we want to be. We'll, start off quieter than we want to be. The LUFS are getting a little higher than we would ideally want them to be. Overall, there's quite a bit that we need to fix here in the master. So I think we already see kind of some of these bigger issues. The LUFS are only going to get louder, and the rest of the track gets louder. So that's really the main thing we want to address. I think that's kind of enough of the master to listen to there, or the mix. We haven't really started mastering yet, but let's see. I guess this is on my mix track, so let me move that over to the master. It's really better to work with the master here. So that's one of the issues we want to check for. We want a good idea of, like what kind of LUFS are we dealing with. It looks like we're dealing with, and this would get higher as it goes on, because you can see like the mix stays pretty loud from that point, and this is the average over time. So like, short term, we're looking at like -12.4. I think that's pretty standard for the rest of the track. So we can assume we're at about -12 LUFS. The true peak already shot up over 0, so there's actually some clipping in the mix. Not a lot. So, if we were looking at like, more than like half a decibel, it'd be really tough to master, but that is manageable. And with this kind of track, a little clipping isn't the worst thing in the world. So, that is kind of one of the foundational metering principles of mastering, is looking at LUFS, true peak, dynamics. This plugin is not free. There are some different plugins though that I'll show you that kind of achieve the same result that are free. So I'm looking for Paz Analyzer here. This is a pretty valuable plugin as it measures a lot of stuff that Ulian loudness meter doesn't measure very simply and easily. So I'm going to bring this actually back down to the master as well, if we're not on the master already. So down to the master here. And what this plugin is going to do is let us look at the overall frequency of the track. So this is, a spectrum analyzer here. This is a phase analyzer, what do they call it? It's a position analyzer. So this is looking at our stereo field in this pizza slice. So if you see like there's kind of a pizza slice here, that's really the stereo field that you want to work with. You want to fill this up as much as possible. You can't really get out here in the corners, but you want to fill it up as much as possible. And then you want to avoid being in this antiphase region. What this is, the antiphase is kind of removing, it's like phasing. So the audio layers on top of each other. So you have like conflicting audio, and it results in like quiet patches on the left and on the right, and it wastes space in your mix because it's still taking up space here in the spectrum, but it is not audible, so it's not good to have antiphase, and it can also create some weird harmonic content. Then also we have a basic meter, and Ulian really is better than this, but one thing I like about this is this peak hold function, so that will show like what the actual maximum levels are. Then we have to watch in real time to see kind of what the track is actually doing. So let's look at this, and I'll pull up let's actually just look at this so we can focus on what's going on here. So start off with quite a bit of
Andrew, don't play.
Quite a bit of this frequency spectrum built up. You can see just real quick, I'll show you a few free plugins that can accomplish essentially the same thing as that. So one is, pretty much every DAW has a spectrum analyzer. So, like I can pull this up and we basically got the same spectrum analyzer. Lots of settings you can mess with on there. I usually don't really mess with them, but you can. They kind of see different things, but the defaults are usually pretty good on these. And then the plugin is from Isotope, which is Ozone Imager. So this is a great plugin for free if you need a position analyzer. And I actually haven't even authorized it. This is a free plugin, but it does the same thing. You see, it's got the pizza slices and all that, and the anti-phase spot. So it's the same concept. So you can download that and use the spectrum analyzer. I'm going to put out an episode on anti-phasing in general. For the purpose of this master, like we're going to handle it in the master, but it's really best to handle it in the mix if you have the option. Sometimes you might be mastering tracks for somebody else and didn't really have any say in the mix. And I think that this is kind of a good track to use for that reason, because I didn't handle the anti-phase in the mix. So we're kind of seeing a common mistake that would be made in a mix that you may have to handle in mastering. So we'll leave these pulled up. And then fundamentals of mastering, let's look at this Ulian loudness meter again. So basically each platform has different values they're looking for here. And so I just canceled that out, but basically, and you can actually upgrade this and it'll like even tell you different sorts of systems you can set this up to master for. But most platforms are looking for a specific LUFS level, and that's the integrated LUFS. They want a specific LUFS value for the whole song, and they also want to define true peak. And the more dynamics you can fit in there, usually the better. So essentially what happens is, like, if I take let's pull up this Waves plugin, which is L1 Ultra Maximizer. It's a limiter. So let's say, like, and this is a really common way people master tracks. It's the way I master tracks for the longest time. So let's just say I want to smash this, right? And get really loud. So, you see, like, we have pretty much no dynamics at this point. Like, the master is just right there at 0 the whole time. Like, it's louder. Like, it's definitely a bit louder. And actually, you can hear audibly. It's really not that much louder. And the other things that we'll do to master will make it louder, more crisp, and more dynamic. And the dynamics are really important. I'm going to show you why. So essentially, we're at 0 LUFS there. Like, even if I pull up Ulian, it's going to say we're at like almost 0 LUFS. All right. At -3 LUFS pretty much, and we can make it even louder, doing something like this, like, okay, you're mastering for absolute maximum loudness. Just redlining the whole time, right? Even with the limiter, like, the fact is it still actually clips, even if the meter doesn't necessarily show it. Ulian measures it very accurately. So we have this really loud master right now, but here's what the streaming services are going to do. They're going to normalize it so that you're not louder than everybody on the platform by default. All right, we can return this back to 0. By the way, delete returns that to 0 in Ableton, in case you're wondering. And then, all right, so, like, let's bring this down to, like, -10 about, and you'll see, that's what the streaming services are going to do to it, and it just completely kills the dynamics of your track. Like, you have almost no dynamics at that point. It's horribly distorted, and a lot of people master this way. Like, you'd be surprised, and it doesn't work. You're just mastering for maximum loudness. The streaming services are going to turn it down, perhaps even more than that with a track like this. So, it's really not ideal to master in this, like, as loud as possible way. It's really going to hurt your project, your mix a lot. So we're going to talk about how to master dynamically in the future episodes. These are just kind of the fundamentals of mastering. Like, you want to aim for a specific LUFS value for each platform, a specific true peak, and try to maximize dynamics in that range. And you actually end up being rewarded by the streaming platforms for having a more dynamic master, and they will make your song sound louder in comparison to other popular songs. So, like, if you're able to match the levels, just these specific levels, even more so than like the relative levels of instruments next to each other, you can match the loudness unit full scale of the song, as well as the true peak and the dynamics you're going to end up. And also, each platform has a specific sort of loudness unit that they're looking for in regards to their software. So, you want to match Spotify's LUFS and true peak. You want to match Apple Music's LUFS and true peaks, and then submit to each of those platforms separately. It will make a huge difference. I think a lot of artists don't bother to do that. A lot of labels don't bother to do that. But usually, they're usually within a very marginal region of each other. And so if you master for Spotify, it's still going to sound pretty good on Apple. But for the sake of this series, we're going to go through how to master for each platform. And I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that make it pretty easy to show you how to do this. In fact, let's actually go back, because I'll show you one of these tips and tricks right now. So we pulled up this bad master that I made, this really, really bad master, right? So I have this plugin. I bought it as a plugin form, and I'll show you more of what I do with this in future episodes. But this is from Meter Plugs. It's called Loudness Penalty. They actually have a free website where you can still perform the same analysis with your masters, but I just like being able to do it inside of my DAW. So, if we start playing this, it'll show you basically what each of the platforms would do to this master. Oh, I forgot to preview it. So yeah, it really ruins it by a lot, even if we turn this back up. That doesn't sound professional to me, and I don't think it sounds professional to you either. So we're going to talk about, how to really get the loud mixes that sound like what you would hear from a professional studio right on your laptop. This is really some key information for getting the ideal masters on your laptop every single time. And join us on the next episode, and we'll be talking all about creating dynamic mixes. So this is the fundamentals. You understand the importance of a dynamic mix now, but in the next episode, we're going to talk about just overall principles for getting a more dynamic master. See you next time.